Hello, hello. Hey, welcome to another episode of Lights Out Sports Debates, and specifically, you're here with Equilibrium with T Perfect. And again, as you can see by the title, we are going to go ahead and today discuss what I believe are some rather delusional comments. But hey, you decide for yourself, right? By Richard Jefferson. Okay. And we all know that recently Richard Jefferson has been. Uh, somewhat of a shill towards clutch boards, anyone and everyone who kind of identifies with that camp, and really just a prototypical LeBron homer. And again, that's just something that we try and avoid. But again, this show's dedicated specifically to tackling these bad takes head on, establishing again an equilibrium, and trying to get back to a point where um we can kind of debunk all these things. Okay. And kind of go from there. So, for those of you who are kind of in the dark about that, so recently Richard Jefferson was on a podcast, right? And I forget exactly who he was with, but it was some, social media there. And he was asked about somehow or another, of course, the discussion of whether or not LeBron actually joined a super team and how that, played on on his legacy was brought up, right? And so that being said, obviously, you can't just have a conversation these days about what happened, in 2011 on the Heat team, why they had success, what was the status of those players at that point. They were great. You can't honestly talk about the Heat from 2011 to 2014, what they accomplished, what they failed at, the composition of their roster, how great those individual players were. You can't just have an honest discussion about that without it turning into basically an excuse fest of, oh no, they still weren't the deepest team, or oh no, other teams have done that before. And so it's just like it doesn't stop at basketball. You can't just mention that. If you mention it, even if you're not meaning to knock on LeBron or anything, you want to talk about that team. It always devolves into, you guessed it, slander towards other greats, right? Because far be it from, I mean, it's against, at this point, it's pretty much against the rules uh to mention anything that's could be construed as derogatory for LeBron or his career, even if that's not your intention. Okay. So with that being said, that was the case when yesterday Richard Jefferson was asked about that team. And then, of course, he starts to opine naturally, right, on some of the other greats, which in his mind were part of incredible super teams, right, that, were stacked, had no business losing. And specifically, he pointed out, first and foremost, he points out that Charles Barkley, because Charles Barkley was commenting on it before him, he said, "Oh, Charles Barkley, weren't you part of a dynastic super team yourself in Houston? What happened there?" Then he switches immediately to, he's like, "What about Shaq and Kobe?" Right? He's like, "Didn't they recruit?" And he says, "A prime Gary Payton." And he says, like, at that point, the second greatest scorer of all time in Karl Malone. And he uses those as what he thinks are gotcha moments, right? He said, "Hey, look at what I'm saying. I can just say names. I don't know the context," or he just ignores the context, right? Doesn't have any idea what he's talking about. He just wants to throw these other names in the wind to detract from what he considers an attack on LeBron James, right? And so, I mean, it's so many things ridiculous to it. And this is obviously one of the easier debunks we've ever had. I'm sure you don't need me to again break that down and tell you guys why that's insane, right? We know that Akeem and Pippen and Barkley were not prime by any stretch. Pippen obviously was just coming off injury ravaged season with his back, his knees. Hakeem Olajuwon had knee surgery, basically career ending surgery in '97 on his knees. Right, he was not the same player whatsoever. Charles Barkley was well outside of his prime, obviously, and they didn't have any. They broke up after 1 year. They didn't have any close success. Pippen ran to the Trailblazers. Um, you had Barkley retired. Like all these things were were just it's available information for anyone who is waiting to see it, right? And any basketball fan can look at the situation, can look at the names, can look at the stats, can look at the context, and be like, you know what, this is not what we would consider a super team. That team. It's. I mean, we can go through the roster. The rosters weren't deep, and obviously these guys were well past their primes. And I mean that's just common sense, right? And then we go to Shaq and Kobe. Same thing with them. Shaq and Kobe absolutely were still arguably prime. Shaq was still prime. Kobe was basically just hitting his prime. Obviously in '04, he was one of the best players in the league. That's absolutely true. However, then he talks about Karl Malone. Gary Payton was basically 8 years removed from a DPOY and 37 years. He was not prime at all. Okay, Karl Malone was 40 and dealing with his fair share of injuries. These people were these guys were not these guys like contributed very little to that team. No one was playing defense anymore. That team was again Shaq and Kobe, and to Richard Jefferson, that constitutes one of the super teams that existed before LeBron joined D Wade and Bosch. Now you guys know me, right? And I've said this. I still believe, in my opinion, that I think LeBron James is the GOAT, but I don't believe that for, my reasoning is, again, that I believe that he checks all the boxes as far as accolades and awards. He's high up there with those, and his consistent dominance of the game for as long as he has, and especially in an uninterrupted fashion, I think puts him over the top for me. But again, it's not because of the fact that I think he was in quote unquote like the hardest era or played the best teams. None of that matters. It's what you do on the court, right? And the totality of his career. But I'm also not above telling it how it is and coming at his story and everyone else's, every other player in NBA history from an unbiased perspective. Okay, that's really important when you're discussing the game in any sport, right? Because if people get the inclination that you are playing favorites or you're not being honest with the discussion, they'll go away. They won't take you seriously, and that's why we can't take these shills seriously when they try to talk about LeBron and his career. Like Richard Jefferson is trying to equate joining is trying to basically create two 40-year-olds joining the Lakers, injury riddled, well outside of their prime, to a team that contained a two-time, basically defending MVP, LeBron James, back-to-back MVPs when he joined the Heat in 2011. Okay, basically a Dwayne Wade who just had arguably the best season of his entire career in 2009, an all-time season for in many metrics. Chris Bosh was basically a 22-11 guy for his entire career in Toronto, basically a seven-time All-Star before joining that team, the unquestioned alpha of that team, okay, and one of the best power forwards in the entire game. So never before, though, had we seen the reason why that was unquestionably a super team is never before had we seen a um, a team that came together and had that particular combination of talent, top end talent added to it. We had never seen a multiple time MVP join with two other players that were arguably top 10 in the league. I mean, at worst, top 10, right? Two other guys who were unquestioned alphas on their own teams joining up together. That had never happened. All right. Now, that's also not to say that there have not been teams that were fantastic and they came together and they were super teams. I don't believe that for any reason that like the Heat were the first team that were stacked or loaded. That's not what I'm saying at all, right? Like you look at the Lakers. I know that they came together in the '80s organically to some degree. Kareem was there first, and they added some pieces. But yes, it doesn't matter how you got there. You guys were still a fantastic team, right? What maybe with the most dominant roster ever. The '80 Celtics were in the same type of thing situation. Like the names on that roster, they all came together, held by a top five player, right? Arguably. Same thing with the '90s Bulls. They came together, one of the best defensive rosters ever assembled. A lot of guys who were great at their position. Obviously, Pippen and Jordan, two of the best ever. Those guys, every team and every alpha that has enjoyed consistent success, right, in any sport has always maintained a level of star power, consistency, sacrifice, luck to a degree for staying healthy, and that contributes to the success. And so, like, that's it's been the case. No one wins with a subpar roster consistently, et cetera, et cetera. It's just not the way it goes. But like I said, there are levels to it. Okay, and it's not a sin, and I don't think it's a against shouldn't be against the law to actually point to a team and say, yes, that team came together that way. They were better than everyone else because of this reason. People take that as an affront to LeBron James. Okay, it's not. I don't use rosters to rank or lower players all time. Okay, to knock them. It is what it is. That's really beyond their control. Okay, but at the same time, you can have an honest discussion. That team had no business losing in the 2011 finals. They did so almost exclusively because LeBron underperformed, especially in the fourth quarters of those games. We can go back and check those out. Okay, that's common knowledge. It's been dissected, talked about for years. Okay, and it wasn't the first meltdown of his career. It wasn't the last. Okay. That being said, I also don't use those things to knock players. Okay. Because everyone has those moments in their career. Every top 10 player, every your favorite player, my favorite player, every player we talk about and rank has had those low moments in their career. LeBron's no exception. But where we get off track is where these idiots and clowns think it's their job. It's almost a religion at this point to defend LeBron at all costs and basically erase every aspect of his career and make it taboo to talk about that doesn't fit the narrative that they're trying to push about him, that he was flawless. All right. And the further we can get away from that, the better. So, kind of coming back to the Richard Jefferson thing is, um, when we see, and he wasn't the only one, he wasn't the first, he won't be the last to kind of go into this narrative that, oh, but since LeBron, blah blah blah, LeBron did it, and he's gonna just pull names out of his hat to try and convince them that they were super teams, etc. Now, I'm not against players or someone else saying, hey, you know what, this was a team that was great or whatever, and they came together, they had a lot of great players. Yes. But when you can't deny, or when you start to deny the reality of what that Miami Heat team was, especially when you only have five guys on the court at the same time, that's when we get to a point where everything out of your mouth is just endless cap after that, right? And with that being said, it's just it's almost our responsibility to kind of debunk and attack it head on. Otherwise, you get these narratives just spread, especially to people who are just starting to maybe join the game, enjoy the game, haven't really had a lot of experience with history of the association. And if the first thing they're subjected to is these ridiculous takes and nonsensical remarks from shock jocks like Gilbert Arenas, like Jefferson, like Nick Wright, like all these other guys that you see each and every day, right? Who just use just like the worst talking points, the fakest narratives in order to push their agendas, then that's when we have a problem. That's when you start to see the basketball culture degrade, right? Because then it gets away from actually just talking about the game, talking fairly about other players. Then we start hearing things like, they don't talk the game, they talk what they want. They say, no, we can only talk about this era positively because every other era was garbage. Because players were whatever, whatever. You hear it every day on social media, the endless war to try to discredit everything that isn't their favorite player or their favorite era, their favorite team, whatever the case is. And that's exactly what was happening with Richard Jefferson when he was trying to call out these other players, these other teams, these other eras, and kind of dismiss the fact that, hey, Miami Heat, it's well noted that LeBron and Wade were in communication with each other and made it happen. Eventually communicated with Chris Bosh. That happened. And hey, they did what they did. They won two, which is great, back to back, went to four straight finals. That's an achievement, right? And no one's trying to take that away from them. But like I said, if you are in denial about how that team got created, just how stacked they really were, and how that was kind of an unprecedented type of situation in league history, both of how they came together, uh, how they were all in their relative primes, and the expectations that were on that team. Which I mean, largely they met. Obviously, no one expects. I don't think anyone really expected them to actually win. Eight straight titles or whatever. That would just cap from LeBron James and stroke his an ego. But I mean, I think they did what they did, and with an evolving roster, but they let the team there. They accomplished what they brought cultural relevance to Miami, and it is what it is. It's all history now. But with that being said, um, we have. Hang on one second. I just gotta make sure here. All right. So hopefully we have a couple guests here show up, so we get another added perspective on this here. But I'd like to hear your guys' information and topic, or basically all of our what your thoughts are on this. And obviously, if you haven't had a chance to go watch the Richard Jefferson video, I would actually suggest that you go ahead and do it because it's kind of illuminating, right? And it has to do with you know everyone being kind of falling and not really pushing back because you can see him on the panel. He just starts pushing, or he has no pushback, no extra clarifying questions when they ask him about that. And he goes on his rant about um, how they were so they weren't that stacked. It wasn't really a super team, and how these other teams were far better, et cetera, et cetera. And so, with that, it's just, but it's not surprising. And it's really not the first time I know you guys have seen something like that. And, when we talk about that, we're trying to get to a place where, especially here on this show and in this channel, where that's all what we press. We want to talk about every player, every era, every team fairly. We want to discuss series, we want to discuss matchups, we want to talk about current happenings in the NBA. And we want to do it in a way that doesn't favor and like I'm not saying also that you can't have favorite players. Everyone does. But when it leads you to a point where, especially if you're a media or content creator, where you just go on and, you are obsessed with one person or obsessed with pushing a narrative to the point where you have to discredit others, other players, other teams, other timelines, other, and, you really oppose people who have different or differing points of view than you, to the point where you want to kick them off, silence them, and censor what they're saying, then that's where it becomes a problem, right? Then sports becomes largely political in a lot of people's minds, right? And I'm not going to call anyone out, but because there's a lot of suspects. There's a lot of people who do that. And you guys know who they are, and we're trying to kind of blaze a different path here, right? And so I did drop a link for anyone who wants to come up here. We're going to be joined here pretty shortly, um, by my good friend CW, but that gonna takes us into I guess a question I want to pose to everyone here, and say that what are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously, I'm one of those people. You may rank players differently. You all know how I do it. I really just try to use the breadth of your resume, your accolades and achievements, the totality of your achievements, your stat, everything, right? And I do not believe though in knocking players for who they played with, right? Or, the rings they didn't win, right? Obviously, it's a bonus, and players who have like multiple finals MVPs will rank higher, obviously. But obviously, winning a lot of championships depends on your team chemistry, your luck, things like that, right? It's largely beyond your control as a player, even though you put up fantastic stats. And I think that's one thing that people get lost in the sauce about is that we're not trying to tear down specifically LeBron James when we talk about certain things in his career. Obviously, we know he was fantastic. He had a great peak. I would say his top 5 peak ever, right? He's a fantastic all around player. I think during his prime, he was one of the better two-way players ever, and I think we can prove that. Have proven that a number of occasions. His accolades and achievements. He's top 5 in MVPs, Finals MVPs. Obviously, the most All Star selections, the most All NBA selections. He does have 6 all defensive selections. So the man was, especially from his prime, from like '08 to 18, was phenomenal. Stacks up with everyone, and then he kind of kept going from there. But like I said, that's all you'll hear really from a lot of these other creators, a lot of these other talking heads, is that LeBron did no wrong, and they'll try and use that, but we know that he did. We know that there were times when he didn't play well. We know that he did, average 35% shooting for an entire series against the Spurs in '07. And, we know that the next year, right, when he was significantly better statistically, he was obviously melted down against the Celtics team. And obviously, we know that was a fantastic Celtics team. They played one of the best defensive teams of all time, right? But we also know that LeBron did shoot 8 for 42 for the first two games of the series, right? And was abysmal, had like 17 turnovers through two games, was basically single handedly losing those games for his teams, right? Even though his teammates were good enough to keep the first game within 4 points, even though LeBron was historically bad, shooting basically 2 for 18 with 10 turnovers. Those things don't get mentioned because it's basically sacrilegious to do so right at this point. And so when you hear that, when you see that, all right, it's that's where we want to kind of get off, right? Now also let me kind of be fair, right? Those aren't when I talk about different players and things, those aren't those examples I just gave you, right? All the statistical flops of his career or whatever. Those aren't the things I go to when I'm discussing LeBron James. I don't want to. I don't need to highlight his greatness. I don't need to do that to compare him to any other player, right? To me, his accomplishments stand alone. And like I said, if you're going to nitpick at LeBron's career, you can and have to do so for every other player, right? You can do so. I don't need to run down the list of Shaq's failures, Hakeem's, Kobe's, Mike's. They're all well documented, right? And I mean, it's it's been that way. And so, with that being said, we kind of want to get away from it, but the whole thing though is like, and we've seen this pushed extra hard the last few years, right? Especially since 2016, where the Go debate had just basically raged out of control. Okay, and it's to the point where we're trying to get back to a little bit of normalcy, where people are just growing sick of it. The fatigue is huge; it's real, because almost every single time you turn on the TV, if there's anything of basketball related, you'll hear some whisper, or hey, it's just about it, of the GOAT debate. Mike, LeBron, Mike, maybe Kobe sprinkled, all these things, right? It's not just, you can't just turn it on and have them discuss the X's and O's, talk about current players, or even look back favorably on other eras and talk about the matchups, these accomplishments from some of the greats. It's always just a narrative to bump up so and so, right? At the detriment of someone else. It's Mike bad, LeBron good, vice versa. It never ends. It's a constant war, right? So we want to get away from that. We want to talk about things that were fantastic. That's what we're going to try to do going forward here, especially on Sundays. We just have general basketball discussions. We hope we pick the topics. You guys can chime in as well. We're going to have this Sunday, we're actually going to have a fantastic debate between, I guess, CW and we got Casual up here. And so that's going to be very entertaining as well. But with that also being said, again, I really want to know what your guys, and feel free to like and subscribe, and please go ahead and comment because that helps us out too. We're going to try to grow. We're trying to get a following here where we can have a discussion with people who actually know the game, who want to learn the game, and are really just completely over the one tunnel visioned, one dimensional talking points you always hear in the Mike LeBron debate. And we want to get to also a place where we can talk about Mike and LeBron. We can even debate them. Hell, I'm not opposed to that, and I'm not opposed. I don't want to stop talking about them forever, but we want a little variety, and we want to do it in a way that's not just, hey, your player sucks, mine rock, whatever the case is. And no matter where you come out on that debate, I don't care. My only prerequisite is that if you're going to debate, you're going to have a ranking system. Just have a criteria, right? Have a way to back it up with facts, logic. Make sure that goes through, however many players you want, 1 through 10, 1 through 50, whatever the case is. Okay. And so, yeah, that's just, I thought it was a very hilarious take because you saw guys like Richard Jefferson, guys like, even Dwayne Wade to some degree, Gilbert Arenas, LeBron himself on some of his podcasts, JJ Barea, now it's Steve Nash. A lot of these talking points they just talk about is, they're just tired play debunk narratives where, like LeBron himself was saying, he had no help, or, if he didn't play well, they had no chance of winning, which we know is obviously false. That's been proven wrong. In fact, that's on the next show. That's actually one that I'm actually going to cover for you guys, and that should be a dandy. But we're gonna have that's one thing I just wanted to kind of tackle today and get your thoughts. Feel free to just comment leave a comment there after the show. Is what do you think about Richard Jefferson's comments, and not just his, but the comments you hear in the narrative of was it a super team? Why not? And why do you think, most importantly, there's a push to kind of block that out from everyone's collective memory? And why do you think these content creators are so afraid of talking about, the failures that went along with that Heat team to a degree, right? In the years they didn't win the title, and just in general, LeBron's career. Why are they trying to kind of, make it against the law, the sports law, to kind of cover the man's entire career, objectively, because it's been blown way out of proportion out here on these streets, man. Like, you got people I just named, and it's basically a back and forth that's never going to end. And I hate covering it. Like, I wanted to get away from that debate, the one sided debate, and kind of answer the tough questions, right? And so we're going to do that as well. All right. So also, let's see here. Let's just check out some of the questions here. And okay, so we got a question from Pen Kema. Hope I said that right, man. But my goat, like I said, earlier, my goat is LeBron James, and the reason why that is because I think that when you look at the totality of his career, right, just how he checks every box as far as accolades and achievements. Granted, he doesn't have the most in everything, right? He does have the most in all the NBAs. Also, we accomplished that, right? The statistical accumulation doesn't move the needle for me. I don't care about that, right? But by my measure, he is a top 10 scorer of all time. Like, how I determine that is that there have been exactly 10 players in NBA history who have led a team for at least 10 seasons at a 50% clip and better scoring. All right. Only 10 players have ever done it. He's one of them. Okay. But I think that when you look at the consistency of his career, no matter what you want to say about the era, his style, um, his lack of defense or whatever for the last few years, that's great. But he's consistently and objectively been a top 10 player or better for his entire career. And that's widely unheard of, right? Who's the closest player to have done that? You could talk about maybe Kareem. Kareem was maybe a top 10 player in the league up until 85. That's debatable, right? But, he fell off significantly his last few years. Not the case with LeBron. Obviously, I'm not delusional enough to say that LeBron last year was like 2013 LeBron, right? That's just a dumb take. But in my opinion, the way I rank it, he's been dominant analytically. He has the accolades and achievements to speak for it, right? He stacks up with anyone you want to put up there, really. Okay. And then his basically doubling the prime of whoever you want to put up there with him, to me, that pushes him over. And I get it. If that's not your cup of tea, I'm never, ever going to ridicule you for your decision or say that's wrong. I just need a criteria. So that's the answer. I hope that answered your question. And the second part is like, why do you think nothing naming that labels you in some way? So if you talk about to answer your question, if you're talking about labels, like I said, I think that a lot of people are afraid to say certain players are the GOAT because I think they're afraid of the backlash that comes with that, right? Whether it's LeBron, whether it's Mike, whether it's Kobe, someone else, right? They're afraid that they'll be attacked for their viewpoint and asked, like, put on trial, right, to defend it. They don't want that smoke. They don't want, they just want to have a conversation. They're not looking to get into an argument. And I don't blame them for that. It's, gone are the days really where we can just sit down and have a basketball discussion and say, oh, you like this guy? Great. I like him. And here's why, without it flying off the handle into like this huge heated debate. Right. And I think a lot of people, obviously Mike and LeBron are like the two most polarizing players ever. And it's become that. And I still, I think a lot of players or a lot of people, fans in general, um, if those are your two guys or one of them is, then I think that's why people kind of shy away from that or lie about it, because they haven't done a shitload of research to try and back that up, and they shouldn't have to, right? That's our job. They can just be regular good fans. I like a lot of players. Someone says I like Mike as the go. I'm like, why? He's like, well, I watched him play, and I think he did this well. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, you didn't give me like his entire statistical resume. I don't care about that, right? If someone says I respect it, same thing with LeBron. Anyone else you want to name, okay? And but if you're going to debate me on it, then it's probably wise for you to have a criteria. But I hope that answers that question for you, man. That's a good question. You know, and if especially if that's how you meant it, and I hope I answered that correctly. Um, as far as like, because we want to have great discussions like that. We want to have questions like that, and answers like the one I provided, where it just opens up discourse, right? So, you know, with that being said, it's hard to do these days. But that's a great question. Again, thanks for showing up. Hope you like and subscribe. Feel free. The lights out, and like you'll get much more of this content. Again, we go live every Sunday. And this show that I have, I might move. I might just go ahead and move it to Saturday. Depends on my work schedule. But we're gonna go ahead and keep this going. We want the dialogue. We want to debunk bad takes, bad narratives, and really try and educate people who come here uh, about the totality of the game, so we can make sure that they're getting correct information. That's my main purpose. That's my main goal, is to make sure that you're getting the information that you need. And I'm also not claiming to, know everything about the sport and, the nuance, everything else, but I do know that I do a lot more research than most people I know. I know that I've been watching the game for a lot longer than a lot of people I know. And, you know, I do my best to actually stem it. Pingima says, no single right answer. Riffing on questions and answers is more interesting than trying to form the perfect answer already. But no, I 100% agree. That's a great take. And that's where true discourse comes in, is kicking ideas back and forth, you know, with no right or wrong answer. That's exactly what discussion is. And especially when you're talking about something that doesn't have a definitive answer, like who the best player of all time is, you know, or it's completely 100% opinionated, right? And it depends on what you look for, and that's fun. That's where the fun comes in, right? And just like saying, "Oh yeah, I value this, and I like this. I like this about this player," and that's when you just talk about series, you talk about matchups, you talk about the good time, and that's when it becomes friendly, and that's when you start to get a following, right? Because then they know they can come here and do exactly what you said, is riff on questions, kick it back and forth, get varied opinions, viewpoints you didn't think of, just things to think about, make it interesting. And that's what we want to try to do here. Instead of just arguing, instead of talking over people, instead of just muting people, censoring what they say, which is what a lot of these larger podcasts do. Trust me, I was part of one of them that did it almost worse than anyone. And obviously, they're all out there. And we want to try to kind of break away from that, and let you say whatever you want to say. Come up here. I'll put the link in the chat one more time, just in case anyone does want to come up and join and kind of give me an opinion on what they think is, what they think about the topic, what they think about the topic of super teams in general, and why, more importantly, the question of why do you think it's become such a taboo topic to talk or to bring up some of the low points in LeBron James' career, right? And I wonder if that is Dart. I hope not, but Michael, no, I've never said that. I don't think any fan base is the best, right? It's all about what's your flavor, right? I mean, it's all about what you think of, what you're a fan base of a fan or a player for a reason. And I would hope that beyond that, we could just be fans of the game in general without saying, this is the best or that is the best. Just be fans of the game, try to move away from one player, right? That's where we're starting to make some progress as actual fans. So, but it's been, you know, with that being said, I mean, it's an interesting question, but, um, but I used to be, and I mean, this is common knowledge too. I used to be a LeBron or a Michael Jordan is the go guy. And, like with anything, your viewpoints as you go along and opinions change. And that's what happened with me. And, especially as LeBron James' career went along. But again, if someone comes up to me and says, I think Michael Jordan is the best, I will not have an ounce of pushback for you. Not at all. That's completely fair and valid. And, I'm asking about your criteria, which I love. I love when someone has a criteria or a thought out reason why they say something. And that's my favorite part of this is when someone comes up to me with a new criteria or a solid one, I celebrate that person. I want to bring them up. I want to talk to them. I want to debate them. I want to amplify their voice, you know, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do here on the show of Equilibrium. Because equilibrium to me means we're getting to a point where we're just in between, right? We're level and there is objectivity all around. That's the name of the game. All right. And at the same time, that means dispelling and taking down these terrible takes that we see each and every single day. And so, it's gonna be a journey, guys, from start to finish. And obviously I'm not the first guy to try and take all these on. I obviously won't be the last, but hopefully we can do it to the point where we carve out a niche here and try and keep it going, because if we don't tackle them in an objective manner, who else will, right? You can't count on a lot of these larger programs to do so because it's one guy or the other. There's no in between. There's no compromise with them. It's just, they're right, you're wrong. That's how it always is, right? And that's shock jock material, right? With catchy thumbnails that depict their point of view. And like I said, we want to have true discussion. We want to be truthful, right? Hell, my favorite player is James Worthy. And I would never say I just like his style of play, but I would never ever say that he's anything more than he was, right? I would never say that he's a flawless basketball player. That didn't exist, right? Everyone has nitpicks. So we were supposed to actually have been joined by one of our buddies here from our neighboring channel, CW from Podcasts here. Let me double check here because second here. Okay, sorry to keep it waiting, but good question there. I mean, keep it rolling, man. Keep it rolling. I like questions. I like interaction here. Um, and just got a message there from my bud, and so be joining us here pretty quick. But I always like the perspective from the chat. All right, what I'm saying, because I mean, hey, tell me I'm doing a good job. Tell me I'm lacking. Tell me that I can improve in some way on the takes that I give you, and why, and that helps all of us to improve. Okay, and so yeah, so I mean, the topic of today's discussion was that newest video, I believe it happened yesterday, about Richard Jefferson and how. But at the same time, I also want to emphasize this. All right, there's the there are the networks and shows that you know of. All right, that I don't have to call them out by name, but that their only goal, their only mission, is to talk about LeBron James, right, and fluff him up, right? They want to do that regardless. Um, one second here. Regardless of context, regardless of truth, that is their entire. Uh, that's their entire goal, right? And so you have them on one side of the spectrum, right? They really don't have. So I mean, their job is to denigrate Michael Jordan and lift up LeBron James. That's their entire goal. That's their entire mission. They've admitted it. They've talked about it. They're proud about it, right? And then on the other side, however, you do have other channels, right, which are a direct antithesis to that. They are the opposite extreme, right? You know some of them. And what they do is they also abandon any common sense, reason, logic to do the other extreme, which is LeBron's terrible. He's a plague on the NBA. He's not top 10. You know, he couldn't hold account. All this, and that. You know, he was, the worst player of all time. Like you have those two channels. Hey, shout out to Iron Man 3D. Thanks for showing up, bud. Appreciate that. And Iron Man is a great fixture. Met him in GJK, obviously, and he's a great contributor there. Always comes with great takes, and we're proud to have him here. And it's to catch you up there, Iron Man, in case you didn't hear. We're discussing the takes that Richard Jefferson had, basically, that it was, to him, it seemed like it was taboo to discuss any of LeBron's failures as a player, or his lowlights, really. And he was trying to deflect the super team argument onto other players, right? What I'm talking about now is that um, we're talking about how there's two extremes, right? There's the team, or there's the podcast, the channels, the talking heads, which worship LeBron, hate Michael Jordan. That's what they do. They're proud of it. The other extreme is the channels which just discredit everything LeBron has done, and say ridiculous things like he's the worst player ever. He's not top 50. Whatever. You've heard the narratives. And like I said, we don't want to be part of either one of them. We want to be part of the one that's in the middle, right? We want to be balanced. We want to be objective. And with that being said, good friend King Speech Row has just come in. There he is. With the soundtrack of his own. What's up, Ro? How's it going, man? You hear me, brother? Maybe he went to a quiet spot. Well, we'll let him get his bearings there, but we definitely want to get the context and the comments from when they're like, what are your take on that? Like, we know, like I said, what are your take on the channels, but both for and against the Go debate, right? Who are the extremes, right? Obviously, they developed because of each other. A couple pop up that worship LeBron, hate Mike. Therefore, you're naturally going to have channels that subsist on bashing LeBron James. You know, those exist just basically to cancel each other out, right? Uh, and so, with that being said, it's like we want to try to avoid those because they're one dimensional. And the sin that both of them commit is they really don't use context. They really don't use truth, reason. Their takes are easy to pick apart, right? On both sides. And that's when you're not really discussing basketball. That's when you're not really a fan of the game. You're just a fan of one person, right? And that's how narrow your knowledge base is, because you only get the things that support your arguments. You're obviously like, you don't really want to talk about these players. You don't want to really discuss the game. You don't want to discuss matchups. You don't want to discuss, you know, legacies, anything like that. You just want to exist to denigrate or raise up one single individual, right? And you're 100% right, Ironman. I can and have criticized LeBron. I'll keep doing it. And you know where I rank him, you know? And you do that in, like I said, when I debate I've debated for LeBron, I've debated against him, and I've done so because you can, and it's healthy to do that, right? And I've debated it where I match him up and whatever the case is. Like his lowlights don't knock him for me, but the fact that you find yourself, or whenever you get away from doing that, and you feel yourself wanting to just say no, 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 I can't have an honest discussion about this player, that's when you should check yourself. I mean, like, am I listening to the wrong people? Am I reading the wrong things? Where did I go wrong? Because that's when you get into territory where you just kind of need to make a clean break from whatever is kind of influencing you in that direction. Because then you start to not enjoy the game of basketball, right? Because you're hyper fixated on one team, or you hate the game now because your favorite player is no longer there. You don't love it for its purity, for how it's evolved. You don't like the greats who are moving it forward. You're just about one person. And I meet those people every single day. When I was on GJK, like that was all really like we talked to tons of people like that. And you see it every day. You turn on TV, ESPN, and it's really tough to kind of go a day without hearing about some form of that polarizing argument. You know, which is just you know pushing LeBron versus Mike, Mike versus LeBron, and it gets really tiring for real basketball fans like yourself, like me. You know, and so we're not going to do that here. All right, we're gonna as you tune into our content, we're going to have honest discussions about every player, right? We're going to talk the matchups. We're going to talk about the good times. We're going to talk about what's going on and give our picks, right? And we're not going to be the same. You're not going to tune in and hear us criticizing or just tearing down Michael Jordan and LeBron James just for the sake of doing it. If we're talking about their lowlights, it's just in context of something else, right? And also rest assured that we're not doing it to knock them, right? Or to lower their ranking. Nope, not at all. You know, and that I can say with confidence because anyone who's tuning in here to watch me or to listen to me has heard me for years now going on about that very topic of how I want to be based and objective and how I can argue for and against players easily because I'm like that. All right. And, you know, we want to keep on doing that. And then, you know, um, and then let's see what some of the contacts here. Iron Man says, I think Braun can play a lot of time on the court, and it's either because another team will score on him or not getting back on defense. Yeah, that's true. I mean, he has obviously regressed defensively, especially since 2018 after the injury he had in 2019. He wasn't the same defensively. I mean, I do think sometimes he can be a liability defensively. Other times he can lock in, but he's just not consistent. You're right about that, and I don't think that's a but you're right. He's maintained at least his offensive level higher than anyone else ever. And you expect to see some regression at 39, at 40, 41, whatever it's going to be right now. I believe it's 41 by the time the season's are. But that's to be expected. But he's still going to be a top 15 player in the league, right? Top 10, 15 player in the league, hopefully next year. But we'll see. Um, and then Pink Team says that makes you an analyst and a party in the realm of basketball debates opposed to fans who simply say they love watching LeBron play without more valid arguments than suggest. Yeah, no, exactly, and that's what we're trying to get away from, right? Oh, let me bring my guy CW up here. Hey, what's up, CW? Made it.
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, I'm just getting home. I thought I'd
Hey,
pop on for a few.
yeah, no, appreciate it, man. We appreciate that a lot. And guys, got a few new faces. This is CW from GoCast Podcast. Uh, amazing basketball mind and a great show. So plug that in. Just to catch you up real fast, C-Dub. I lit off the show by talking about these comments that Richard Jefferson made when he was on this random podcast about they asked him about LeBron's team, the super team 2011. And instead of saying, hey, you know what that was, instead of breaking it down, instead of saying, yeah, these three alphas join each other, it was kind of unprecedented. LeBron two-time MVP, all the things you can objectively say about it, he started going off the handle and was like, "Whoa!" But look at Magic and Larry. Look at Mike and look at Kobe and when they got Gary Payton and Malone. Never minding that they were 40 or whatever, But I mean, I guess the question that raises here is that and Dakota Brock, we've had that debate. Kobe versus Mike, we've done it. We can do it again if you want. I'll set that up. But my question to CW is why do you think it's become so taboo, right? To not just mention things about the super team, but anything in general that like these zealots would consider like a low point or knock on LeBron's career. Why do you think and like who do you think is responsible for kind of like making that a taboo topic?
Yeah. And what's up, Iron Man? How you doing, man? Um, I don't know. I think it's some type of war going on, and you it's gotten weird because it seems like one side wants to be right, and in the case of Richard Jefferson, I watched that and listened to it. Charles Barkley was old as dirt when he went to the Houston Rockets with Hakeem, who I don't even know if Hakeem made All-Star after when they joined forces, but I get what he's saying. You know, it's not outside the realm of superstars joining up, and I guess we shouldn't bash LeBron for doing something that others have done, but at the same time, people took people had a problem with that because we've had such good ambassadors like Kobe, Jordan, Duncan, these guys who stayed with their teams and toughed it out, where it felt like LeBron just, he went and teamed up with two guys in their prime, and that's how he won his rings. That's fine. I mean, winning rings are hard no matter who you team up with. So I think it's just some type of weird civil war that's going on where you can't say anything about LeBron or vice versa. Anything you say good about LeBron, we have to put some negative connotation to it. So I mean, it's just a weird time when in NBA talk and podcasts. But I know why they do it, because they need viewership. So those are very polarizing topics.
No, you can. I mean, that's a great take. You couldn't be more right. I think that, and I kind of mentioned that too. Like, it's just shock jock stuff, right? Like,
Yeah,
and and if you say anything even to try and that goes against that narrative, you're jumped on, you're quickly silenced, you're talked over, whatever the case is. And yeah, I mean, they're just afraid that if you take the totality of someone's career and you talk about it in an open way, I mean, their warped minds think it's somehow gonna, you know, like defeat their argument for goat, and they're not really smart enough to kind of incorporate that. And I think that, yeah, you're right. It's a civil war, it's a plague, that
yeah,
we try to get away from, right? Because that just, it's almost like a cult, right?
yeah. I
Where you're
mean,
just,
that's how it feels.
yeah.
But at the same time, I did some research. I did this on a video I did around January. I looked at ESPN's numbers, and I looked at something where Stephen A was talking about Jordan, LeBron and Jordan, and then I looked at they had something talking about Jokic, SGA, and then even talking about LeBron's birthday. The GOAT debate with Stephen A talking about LeBron and Jordan did, like, all of those other videos combined didn't even match up to that one video. So it's just something that everybody gravitates to. I guess we just want to know who's on whose side, and that's compelling talk nowadays. But I was just surprised that LeBron's birthday wasn't celebrated. People weren't going to watch that. Nikola Jokic, who was having a phenomenal season to that point, SGA as well, didn't
Hmm.
garner any love or any views or clicks. It was all the GOAT debate. So it's just, yeah, it's just a weird time that so many people just gravitate to that, and that's all they want to hear about.
Yeah. And I think a little bit of a degree, like you're right. They want to hear that they're validated, right?
Yep.
And they feel so strongly about it. It's almost like a love hate thing where they want to, and it's almost political to that degree where it's just
Yeah.
like they want to be in an echo chamber. They want to have their viewpoints reinforced, and not even from a it's not even about the sport at this point. It's just about, I'm so, heated about my guy being better than your guy,
Hmm.
and it's emotional, you know. And yeah, you're right. That leads to them, they know what sells, they know what's on fire, and so, the more you do it, and it would be so easy, right, to latch on to kind of that train, that caboose, and just ride it along. But I think it takes more courage what we're doing, right, to kind of
Yeah. I mean, it's boring to me. Like you said, I was listening to you before I came on here. You were saying how you have the LeBron James, I guess, cult style creators, and then you have the same with Michael Jordan. That just, I mean, it's okay to enjoy what his career and what he did, but I mean, you don't have to. glorify him like he was perfect and had no flaws.
Mhm.
And I think it just gets tiring that, we have channels that just go so far to diminish both of those guys' careers when, I mean, isn't it more fun to talk about the careers of great players and how they shape this game and how uh, we get such good basketball? Like, I don't
You'd like to
understand
think
why.
so.
We say,
You'd like to think that, right?
yeah. I mean, yeah. It's. I think it's tiring because I was really into it when some of these channels were debating each other, but then it got so like toxic and they turned it into just talking about the negatives. I'm like, why? If you're going to do a debate, why don't you talk about the good of each player instead of the negative of each player? So it's like we know they had flaws, so tell us why they are the GOAT, not why the other guy isn't the GOAT. Tell us why your guy is the GOAT. But they can't
Yeah.
do that. They have to spend 8 hours telling us why Kobe is terrible or Jordan's terrible. It's just weird. Oh,
No, exactly. And it gets so repetitive, right? Because it's just like you know what you're gonna get. And like you can almost narrow it down to a science at this point, right? Like you can point to a channel and you know that it's gonna be something like that relates to that, right? It's like clockwork.
yeah, because
And yeah.
FYF asked me to debate. I think it was a Johnny, and I was like, no, because we've heard every single thing why people believe Jordan's the GOAT. There's nothing new. He hasn't played basketball in 20 years. So I'll just be spitting off the same things other people have. And it's just at this point, he's getting no new accolades, he's getting no new achievements. We know all the stuff he's done. What's the point of debating something when it's been debated to death? Like, can we debate
Yeah,
like me and
man.
you when we did our worst playoff performances?
Hmm.
You get to
Because
learn.
that was interesting.
Yeah, you get to learn something, you get to talk about something we don't talk about all the time, and that's I mean, that's to me, that's more interesting than talking about the same Jordan's the first to this, LeBron's the first to this. Who cares? Like, they're both great. Let's talk about
Yeah.
something else.
No, exactly. And like if people can be like, hey, just sit down and be like, okay, cool. They're both great. Let's move on. Let's let's bring some other players up. Let's talk about
Yeah.
other stuff, right? Like we always do. Like we debate different stuff. We talk about different things. And you know, it's like that's it's just like so because it's just the fact that we're surrounded though by all that. And
Mhm.
like it just makes it tough to carve out like your own path, right? But I think that
Yeah.
we're starting to do a good job, and that the more we kind of break from the norm, the more we talk about different things, different matchups,
Yep.
actually talk the sport. What's going on, talk team rosters, not sit there and try and bash, you
Mhm.
know, one player or the other. Then I think that we'll slowly and surely carve out, and kind of gather the people that we're looking for, right? Like people
Yeah,
who
and
want
I
to.
think there are
Yeah.
people out there that are kinda getting tired of it. They're hearing the same thing every week. Like, they
Yeah.
want
Dude,
something.
even when I was on GJK, that was like in the chat all the time.
Mhm.
Right. It's like, hey, can we do something else?
Yeah, I mean, we know y'all love LeBron. We know certain other people love Michael Jordan, so you've established that. So let's move on to something else.
Yeah. No, 100%. Like it, and at first, it's when you're first coming into like the sport, right? And you see that, it's easy to kind of get swept up in it and be like, oh, hey, yeah, I feel great about this. But when it's every day,
Mhm.
it's just like, oh my God. Like I just don't even care at this point. you
Yeah,
know?
I honestly, I don't see how where they can talk about that player all the time, like, unless you're gonna get just super repetitive, but there's only so much you can say about him until it's just repeating the same verbiage over and over.
Mm-hmm. No, a
Like
hundred
Dakota
percent.
Bro yeah.
No, 100%. And like that's what actually is kind of be refreshing, guys. And Dakota Black or Dakota Brock, that's exactly what we're gonna do. Like we going forward, we're gonna have a lot of new content planned here that doesn't necessarily have nothing to do with LeBron or Jordan. Like they can be included, right? But
Mhm.
one thing you'll never see from us here, Dakota, is we're not just gonna have an entire show about how LeBron is great and Jordan sucks or vice versa. Like we're
Yeah.
not doing that. That's the as CW said, that horse has been not only beaten to death, but like fire branded, like reused into fertilizer. Like it's so dead at this point that like there's literally nothing new you could ever say that
Mm-mm.
like people haven't heard 1,000 times. We're gonna try to bring, a little bit fresh here. All right. And with that being said, look out guys for Sunday. We're actually gonna have a head to head and it's Kareem versus LeBron. Now it's not gonna be a bash fest, right? It's gonna
Mhm.
be two guys who are very knowledgeable and good at highlighting the positives of the career, very nuanced in doing so in CW and casual. And I'm very much looking forward to that one. And
Yep.
then look forward to also, are you going live tonight, CW? You said?
Yeah, matter of
Or is
fact,
it
I'm gonna have to
tomorrow?
hop off here in a second because I gotta prepare for that. But yeah,
Okay. Well, yeah, be
we're
sure and
going
shoot me
live
the
at
link to that,
7:30.
man.
What's up?
Be sure and shoot me the link to that.
Okay, yeah, I'll text it to you here in a minute.
Okay. That's perfect, man. But hey, thanks for coming on, dude. And I'll donate. And like I said, this is great 2 cents out of you. And I look forward to, well, I'll see you on the show, but also on Sunday for sure.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
All right, man. There he is.
Well, we're not gonna get any type of notification about this.
Oh, dude, you know what? I put it up. I swear I put it up 3 hours ago. Got it confirmed and everything. And then I looked about an hour ago and it was just not there.
Oh my god.
I was like, what?
Boy.
It was a disaster. But anyway.
Yeah, I see all of this. I'm like, damn.
But we actually had a pretty decent discussion here. And I like that we actually had 11 people. That's crazy right now.
Hey,
But
fans growing.
we're growing, man, especially per capita, right? But I would
Yeah.
say the initial discussion I had, as you can see in the title schedule, was this interview that Jefferson did not interview. He was on the podcast, but he was. They asked him, of course, about. They're like, "Oh, do you think 2011 was a super team?" And he like flew off the handle, right? He said no, and then he said all these other teams were super teams instead. Like he said, the 04 Lakers and like the 80s. He was naming a bunch of teams that he felt were super teams, and but he was like offended, right? My question, it begged the question, right? Why do you think? And CW was just up here, give a great explanation, but why do you think and who's responsible for? I guess the movement now that like basically makes it almost against the law to talk about any of the lowlights of LeBron's career, especially when he was in Miami. But I mean, it's just that it's like a push to kind of erase that aspect of it. Where do you think that got started?
I think it got started with either Go James Kingdom or with kids on TikTok. One or the other. I think just people that are fans of this era of basketball that are fans, because I genuinely think that the more and more people start to grow like less bias of which side of the fence they're on, the more people understand all LeBron versus Michael Jordan is an older era versus the younger generation. That's really all it is. Because majority of the people that are fighting for LeBron fans or not LeBron fans that are fighting for the argument that LeBron is the GOAT. It's people that are younger, the people that were born in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? The people that were accustomed to the 2000s. And I think Ajani is more of a Ajani and B. Lee. They're more of an anomaly than they even know in terms of being fans of LeBron. And I think that the Jordan fans are the ones that were either able to see Jordan play basketball or they were born in the 90s, early 90s, and they heard a lot of the notion of what Jordan was doing to where mystique about Jordan rubbed off on them before the era was done. So like I think that, to be honest with you, all of this started with the TikTok generation, or where Johnny came from, which is like Facebook.
No, I mean that's a valid answer. And I mean, like, having spent so much time on that show, I tell you that's where I actually heard it pushed more than anywhere else, to the point where we were kind of admonished not to actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, but like Iron Man here says, we're trying to like kind of break away from shows like that, right? Where, and just narratives like that in general, not just them. They're good at what they do, respect, whatever. They're doing what they want. But we want to kind of get to the point where we can, just like people say here, we can have someone as our favorite player or ranked a certain way, but without denying parts of their career, right? We can have an objective, realistic conversation about it. Not in a way that's hating, We just be like, the good with the bad, and admit that every player has low points or whatever. There's no perfect player. And without, getting emotional about it or feeling like it's hate. And it's the players, like, and the sooner we can do that, the better, really.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you.
Yeah. But yeah, we did that, and I mean, did you see that interview by chance? Or
the Richard Jefferson? No.
Yeah.
I heard him talk shit about Charles Barkley with Kendrick Perkins
Yes.
on the episode, but that's as far as I because some of the stuff he was saying, even with that, like, I'm not a Charles Barkley fan by no sense of the word, but like I mentioning things that person did in their career is not, just because they do wrong doesn't mean you do wrong as well. And I think Richard Jefferson chose the wrong way to approach, attacking his arguments. He more so attacked him than he did attack the arguments. And
Yeah,
by
no,
the
I
way,
agree with that. Yeah, especially because he was trying to say, like, he was trying to say, oh yeah, the '04 Lakers were a super team, and things like he didn't want to talk about. And he said, Hakeem and Pippen and Barkley were super teams, but without any of the obvious context there.
yeah.
And I was like, we were talking earlier, and I said, you know what, you can say whatever you want, and the point is, though, I don't like when you were talking about, you can talk about the 2011 or all that, the Miami Heat from 2011 to 14, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to use it in a negative. You can just say, hey, this happened, without following up by saying, and that's why LeBron isn't top 10. And so,
Yeah.
it's like, with that, I say, if someone says straight up, I'm saying, yeah, I think they were, because that was the only time in history where you had an example of three prime players who were the leaders of the respective teaming up. LeBron was a 2-time MVP. Wade had one of the best seasons ever the year before. Bosh was a 7-time All-Star, 2011 dude on obviously a bad team, but that wasn't because of him. And they teamed up. Obviously, you could do different things with that roster, but still, that's not. I don't use that to knock LeBron in his ranking ever at all. But my issue is, obviously, as we're talking about it, was that people are afraid or just against, and they want to. The reason why that's problematic is because they're reaching out to more and more people these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of putting that viewpoint on them, and if they're impressionable, if they're new basketball fans or whatever, they don't know what to think, then it sets them off on the wrong path.
No. Yeah, and to Dakota Brock, who said he was born in 2001 and he's not one of the people who are like Go James Kingdom. If you aren't, I mean, Go James Kingdom is like an extreme side of the spectrum. So I don't think anybody that is watching this stream right now, you should not be using Go James Kingdom as a barometer of how much of a fan you are of a player. Or the same way, you should not be using Respect to Dart. Shout out to Dart. You should not be using Dart and Michael Jordan fans are the best in their content as a barometer for how much of a fan of Jordan you are. That those are two extremes. If you're just a fan and you're not even like that invested into the shit of where like you're buying all of the merch and you're streaming on a regular basis to to talk about one specific player in a myriad of different ways, you're not them. So it's like you shouldn't be using them as a barometer. And also like they're again, if you were born in the late 90s, early 2000s, and you believe that Jordan is still the GOAT, you're a rarity. I don't know how to explain this to y'all. We would have to go to obviously TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, and obviously it's anecdotal because it's from my experience from the fan bases of these particular platforms that we have. But bro, y'all don't realize y'all are more of a rarity on this side of certain opinions than you even know. Most people think completely like left wing of the opinions you have. So just keep that understood. Dog, and then you got somebody that come out of Dart is nothing like Go James Kingdom. Okay, all right, buddy. Okay, you just missed everything. Got it. It's okay.
Well, here's the thing, Helly. Like that, you can say maybe personally, but that content that before it was basically this is they were 1,000% the antithesis of Go James Kingdom. They were just LeBron terrible, Mike great. That was the totality of their content. And like I mentioned before, there are countless shows that are like that on both sides. Right? Like you got, when we talk about good team, but you got things like sports tea, that's exactly, the idea of like Man Down Sports.
Sports and fitness rants.
Sports fitness rants. Yeah. Like there's for everyone, like there's a counter, right? And like that's where the fatigue comes from, right? So you want to try to get away from that and just kind of be the niche in the middle, which is hard to do, admittedly, in terms of growing an audience, right? Because you can't, they're looking for you to do one thing, and so you gotta kind of set an example and just get them used to the idea.
Yeah,
of being fair.
It's a catch 22. But I mean, bro, I've said this like I think I said this a couple streams ago. Like super teams is a super team. The term super team is turned into whatever the fuck you want to make it. If you believe that the Miami Heat was a super team, but the 04 Lakers wasn't, like, okay, that's your prerogative. Like the definition is not even set in stone. The term super team is not even a legitimate term.
Yeah,
we in the sports world made that a term based upon faulty foundation. So now anytime that you want, you could say a super team is 2 all-NBA players and an all-star. So then somebody will say, okay, was the Oklahoma City Thunder a super team with James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and KD? No, they were too young. Okay, was the San Antonio Spurs a super team with Manu, Tony Parker, and Tim Duncan? No, because they weren't as talented offensively. They couldn't score 20 plus points. Like that, the definition wavers depending on how much how much you give a shit. So like I don't even think that the super team thing is anything to really even talk about, because at the end of the day, you're just gonna goalpost move your way out of that conversation every single time, because there is no set in stone definition.
That's true. That's a great point. And you're right. I mean, there is no definition, and you can tell that by how many teams that magically pop into their head, right? When they try to say that. And there's no set. It's just like kind of what narrative you're trying to push at the same time. And that's why I think it's important to not let things like roster configuration determine where you rank players, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just because it's not fair. They're not sitting there, making the calls or you're writing the checks. So, it is what it is. But let me see. We got Mr. Speech in here. How you doing, man?
Roski.
You were up here earlier. You left. You back?
His mic might be tripping.
You might be tripping out. You're still in Brazil right now. But let's see if we Woodage. You're right. There is no such thing as a perfect player in any sport, let alone the NBA.
Facts.
And we're under no such delusions. I mean, obviously, some people are, but we're trying to break the mold, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Well, if you can't hear us, bro, then we'll just probably meet up on CW's live. You probably heard about that, Casual. If you're trying to hang around, it's like 15 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah, but we'll probably hop on there. But for everyone who joined, we had for us a massive. We had ourselves a massive following today. We topped out at 11 people watching in the live chat, which was phenomenal. For usually it's like 1. So hopefully that continues to grow. We topped 100 subscribers. Let's go for 1 million.
Hey.
And but we had everyone here, and that kind of wraps it up. We had a great discussion. CW, again, we thank CW and obviously Casual. Last words though, Casual. Go ahead and plug in, and we'll do that.
Make sure to follow me on YouTube at Hoop Conductor. I post regularly on every 2-week basis, especially once the season starts. Please follow me on Casual Reacts, especially when the season starts, because I'll be going live during the season, live streaming games, and follow us on Playback. Me and a lot of the content creators that you guys know and love will be on there shooting the shit and sometimes playing little mini games. So please check it out.
Awesome. And I took your advice, and I'm gonna hook up into that.
There we go. Hit me on the back channel. Hit me on the back channel so I can add you into this group chat.
Okay, I will for sure. You said you use WhatsApp, right?
Yeah, we using WhatsApp.
Okay, we'll do. All right, guys. But hey, that's been another episode of Equilibrium. Look out for probably our new time, because I'm pretty sure my work schedule is going to be crazy. But I'm trying to move this to Saturday. And so Saturday will probably be a permanent home for it, just so we have like a packed weekend full of content. And be sure and tune in, guys, on this Sunday, because we got your boy Casual here versus CW. Should be a lively debate. Kareem versus LeBron. And it'll be, between two of our Titanic dudes who are pretty seasoned in debates. So, that should be a good one. I can't wait for that one. But thanks for joining us, guys. And if this channel, or if you guys want to probably tune in to, is that on CW channel, GoCast?
You talking about today's stream? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tune into GoCast, guys. GoCast Hoops. It's going to be a good one, pretty sure. So we'll see you guys. But hey, take it easy. Have a great Wednesday, and we'll see you next time.